Welcome, amazing investors. It's Jason, and I'm here back with you to talk about some really important stuff. This is going to be a good lesson, a really important one. We're talking about pro formas and projections, and this all goes into the stuff we talked about before on how to analyze a real estate deal. But it's about to, I think, come together for you and really gel and really get a lot easier. So let's dive in and let's look into the future. One of my favorite quotes came from Yogi Berra, and he said, "The future ain't what it used to be." Kind of a funny quote, huh? And that's really what it is, looking at these pro formas, because pro formas are just projections. Take them for what they're worth. In order to evaluate a deal, we've got to make some projections. You really just can't do an evaluation without making some projections. But you've got to remember, it's easy to make projections. Making them come true in reality is quite a different matter. So let's dive in here and take a look. Our learning objectives. Let's learn how to create a pro forma projection and learn what assumptions are reasonable and what assumptions are totally crazy and unreasonable. And let's learn how the assumptions will impact the projections, okay? So what I wanted to do, I kind of changed some of the slides around in this lesson a little bit because I think it's best for you just to look at an actual deal, okay? Now, I just grabbed this off my own company's website, jasonhartman.com, and this is a pro forma. One of the things that I think is critical when you're a real estate investor is standardizing your data. Data standardization. When I got into the investor-only business about 11, 12 years ago now, the first thing I did is I standardized. So we use a handy little software program for this, and we're actually developing a new software program that's going to make this even easier to use and easier to read. But this one's pretty darn easy. So let's just take a look at a typical property, okay? Now, I can't go through all of this stuff with you because time will not permit. I actually did a great little video on how to analyze a real estate deal, and it's about 28 minutes long, and it goes into this in depth of the how and the why of all of this stuff. But let me just go through some basic things with you here. So here we've got a property in the Atlanta, Georgia metro area. And it was built in 1985. As you see here, I'm looking at the upper left. It's a fully renovated 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath house. It's about 1,500 square feet. I'm just going down the left side. The price is $89,000, okay? And based on putting, and I don't know why our local market specialist did this with this one, but they have a 72% loan to value ratio. That's actually sort of odd. It's usually either 70 or 75. But whatever, it doesn't really matter for purposes of this discussion. So here, you'll see in bold there that the total cash you'd need to invest in this deal is about $26,000. Cost per square foot, only $59. And look at that picture. That's a nice looking home, right? I mean, you probably can't rebuild that home for anything less than about $75 per square foot and get the land included in the deal. So this deal's looking pretty good to me already, okay? Now, if you look at the projected rent, and again, this is a 1-year projection. You see that right in the upper left, okay? And it's projected at $990 per month. There's a vacancy rate in there. Now, the vacancy rate is driven over by the assumptions that we're going to look at in a moment, and those are in the lower right-hand area of this page. But we've got the vacancy in there. We've got our operating income of $910 per month. We've got property taxes, insurance, management fees, leasing and advertising fees, no homeowners association in this one. We've got maintenance in our projection, maintenance cost, and then we've got our NOI, or net operating income, of $624. Then we're going to apply our mortgage payments to that and get a net cash flow projected here at $290 a month, or about $3,500 per year. And that's basically what we're looking at. We've got some appreciation and principal reduction built in there. But again, this is not an exhaustive lesson on how to read a pro forma, okay? I'm just going over a few of these things because I thought it was better than looking at bullet points on a slide to look at an actual pro forma of a property that we're probably going to sell to one of our investors in the very near future. I just got this off my website a few minutes ago, okay? So let's move on here and let's look at some of those dreaded bullet points, okay? How do you create a pro forma projection? Well, you can do this by hand, you can create a spreadsheet, you can do it on a napkin, you can use, the best way I think is to use a nice little handy dandy software program like we do, and to standardize the data. When you're looking at properties out there in the open market, you're going to find that people present them in so many different formats. It is so annoying because you have to be a detective and you have to look at this and look at that and make sure the math is right. And they all present it in a different way. Some of them leave very important things out because these are salespeople, right? You know, if they're a broker, they're a salesperson. If they're the seller, they're being a salesperson because they're going to try to sell the property to you. And they just want you to buy it. They don't necessarily care that much about how good your deal is. So I cannot emphasize enough standardization of the data. That has saved me so many times, and it really makes it so much easier for our clients. We just teach them how to read that one sheet, the one I just showed you, there it is, and then they know how to evaluate a deal, okay? Now, there's a couple things this doesn't contain, but it's got pretty much everything you need there. In fact, it's got a few things I don't personally care about too much. So maybe it's a little too much, to tell you the truth. So where are we? We're talk about leverage. Well, you know from our prior lessons that leverage amplifies things, right? It can increase your return dramatically, but it's going to reduce your cash flow, and it's going to increase your debt coverage or decrease your DTC, your debt coverage ratio, okay? And, that can get you in a bind. If you use too much leverage and you don't have funds set aside to cover costs, you can get yourself into trouble with leverage. So a very powerful tool, a wonderful tool, but it needs to be used prudently and judiciously. Revenue assumptions. Well, the key factors here are, of course, the rental income and the vacancy rate. We impute as a standard practice an 8% vacancy rate, which is equivalent to about, almost exactly actually, but not totally exact, about 1 month per year. If you have a 1-year lease, your property turns over, it's vacant for a month in between, that's what we use as our standard assumption on vacancy rate. Don't be too aggressive with these things. No property has a zero vacancy. Every property has vacancies. Never believe anybody that tells you that the property will always be occupied. That is fantasy land, and it's a way to get yourself into trouble. And also with the rents, you've got to be realistic on the rents. And we've talked about throughout this course how you can research rents and research prices and get some idea as to whether or not you're getting a good value and you're being realistic. And then the expenses. A lot of people leave out things like management fees. Now, granted, you can self-manage your property. However, I think even if you plan to self-manage, and we teach people how to self-manage properties from long distance, which if you asked me 10, 11, 12 years ago, would that be possible? I would have said, no, you're crazy. But I'm doing it myself, and I actually like it quite well. And, even if you're going to self-manage, you need to include management fees in there, in your pro forma, because you want the investment to stand on its own. Maybe you'll self-manage and you won't like it, and you'll want to hire a manager. Well, You don't want to make hiring a manager turn your otherwise decent investment into a bad investment. And then property taxes, and we've talked about how those can change. Insurance, got to be realistic there. Depending on where you invest, what area you're in, insurance rates vary widely. And then repairs and maintenance, of course. Repairs tend to come in chunks, so you might get one big bill for a new water heater, for example, and that'll cost you a decent chunk of money. And you may get nothing for a long time. So we want to just budget for repairs. And what we do in our performance is we do that based on the age of the property. And so I'm going to show you the repair budget here in a moment. And then the appreciation. Is it in a, you know this all too well, you probably know what I'm going to say because you heard it on the prior lessons, right? Is it in a linear market, a hybrid market, or a cyclical market? Well, the appreciation varies, and it will vary based on your time horizon. So, looking at this pro forma again, same property, but I wanted to just look at some things on the right side of the page this time, whereas before we were looking at the left side of the page. So looking at the right side, I kind of blew up two important parts. One, the financial indicators, and two, the assumptions. Okay, above that you've got your mortgage info, and of course that varies depending on your ability to obtain financing and qualify for the loan. But let's look at some of these financial indicators. Debt coverage ratio, fantastic on this property, 1.87%. In other words, that's almost double. If you were at 1%, that would mean you couldn't afford any foul ups or any mistakes outside of what's on the pro forma. Here, your debt coverage ratio is very good. Let's skip the gross rent multipliers because, again, those just don't tell you enough. Okay, so I don't really like those that much. But the cap rate below that, remember we talked about that in a prior lesson, the cap rate here is projected at 8.4%. And so the question is that a good or bad cap rate? And really, is cap rate that good of a metric? Remember from that prior lesson, I don't love cap rate. A lot of people use it, especially in commercial real estate, but again, it leaves out a couple of very important things, which we talked about before. Cash on cash return. Oh, by the way, is that a good or bad cap rate? 8.4%. It's pretty good. If you were looking in a cyclical market like California or South Florida, or some of the expensive northeastern areas in the northeastern United States, you would see cap rates that would be maybe around 4 or 5%. Really bad. If you're looking in some of these linear or hybrid markets, you're going to see them up around 8% or maybe 9 or 10% even, and those are great. But again, cap rate doesn't tell the whole picture. Below that is cash on cash return. I like that even better, 14% on this one. Now, here's the one where you're going to think, Jason, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. This is hype. Look at what's in bold. Total return on investment here, projected at 38% annually. Wow. You're thinking, that's amazing. And you're right, it is amazing. And it is actually very possible. I've done it. I've done a lot better than that on real estate deals. Many of our clients have. I mean, we have thousands of clients now, and they've achieved fantastic returns, some of them. Sometimes it doesn't go as well. Everything is an individual case-by-case basis. But here's the reason, as we talk about throughout this course, that those returns can actually happen in real life. It's because income property is a multi-dimensional asset class. Remember, you make your return on your investment from multiple sources, not just buy low, sell high, not just cash flow, not just tax benefits, not just my little trademark term, inflation-induced debt destruction. I know that's a mouthful. I'll say it again. Inflation-induced debt destruction. Try that 10 times fast. So you make it in multiple ways. And that's why when you consider all of those factors, including, of course, the appreciation, your return on investment really can be that high. This is why income property is the most historically proven asset class in the world. It is far and away the best asset class I've ever known. Now, a business can be pretty good too, but the idea of a business is different. That requires more of your attention and active participation than income property should. Now, below that, we have the assumptions. So here's what is driving that huge return on investment projected at 38% in the first year. So you've got your appreciation rate here projected at 6% annually, a vacancy rate projected at 8% annually, management fees for a property manager projected at 8% per month, so that's 8% of the rental income, and a maintenance percentage here of 6% of the rental income. So you can see, and listen, don't take my word for it. Search it on the internet. Talk to people in the business. Talk to property managers. Talk to other investors and see what they say about those assumptions. And I think you'll find that they're pretty darn reasonable. Okay? So that is a little more look at the pro forma. Again, I've got a long video on this. I think we're going to throw it into the course as a bonus, but again, it's like 28 minutes long. If not, you can certainly find it online. But it really goes into every single entry on the pro forma and a lot of my philosophy of investing and the stuff that I've done very well with over the years. So the assumptions: rent, vacancy, leverage. Achieving the full market rent could require waiting to find the right tenant for the property. Leverage depends what you can qualify for and what the property can qualify for. So typically you're going to need, at the time of this recording, now granted this can change, hopefully it will, and it'll be even lower at the time you might take this course. But right now you're looking at about 20 to 25% down for conventional financing. And of course, we talked about vacancy rate. We project 8%. We talked about expenses and management fees we talked about as well. And we talked about repairs and how older properties are going to require more in the way of repairs. So what do? Here's your action item. Generate a pro forma for 5 properties. We've got a template for you, but you could also, if you want to make this easier for yourself, you can use other software. There is other software out there. There's software on my website, which I showed you and I really like because it just makes it so much easier. But again, you can do this stuff with a spreadsheet. You can do it with a calculator. Heck, you could even do it in longhand math, okay? I just am saying that so that you know there's no big trick to it. There's no big secret. Certainly, having some good software is the easiest way to go. And your badge completion will be just do this, okay? Enter the market information and the pro forma assumptions for 5 properties that you pick, and then just upload a screenshot of that and you'll earn your badge. And I look forward to talking to you on the next lesson.